On a bright afternoon, I come again with the stories of time. I come to bring you reflections on history. So welcome to this class, the present and the future. It's my word. Again. On Wednesday, I talked about a state of our own. Determination. We have given 2 weeks to this subject. Did I say 2 weeks? We have given 3 weeks to the subject of self-determination from different dimensions. We used the case study of the invasion of different views on self-determination. We have used the book entitled Decolonizing to explain men and women who define self-determination. We have made reference to the Aburi Accord. If you missed these classes, you can always go back to them. Okay, on Instagram, you get the short versions. So you have part 1, part 2, part 3. But you go on YouTube, you see the longer version. On Twitter, X, right? You will find the longer version. So on any platform you are listening to me now, just scroll down and you listen to past editions. I'm saying part 2. So that we don't have up to part 8 of self-determination. So I'm just going Wednesday. We took the title from this book, A State of Our Own, a lecture delivered by Professor Hausa-Fulani. He is the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. It's about Nigeria. And on this edition, I would like to hear from you. So the number will be on the screen soon. The number you will call to join the discourse. Some have said restructuring, it is about breaking away. In this question of self-determination, the North is quiet. It is mostly about the South. The agitation that started in the Southeast has come into the Southwest. Self-determination. Why? Why do you think so? Reflect on it. Let me make this point that Nigeria is not deep. The political elite invests stolen funds in self-interest. Self-interest politics. Nigeria's politics is empty. It does not bring real value to the people. It lacks substance. The reason the men who dominate it are mostly not visionary. They are also empty. The reason poverty makes war on the people. Administrations are similar in outlook and misdeeds, capacity for sober reflection. Politics propelled by corruption, ethnicity, and sectionalism is empty when it is controlled and dictated by men on women and women of violence. Nigeria's politics is dangerous. Dangerous politics throws up men and women blinded by their sins against the masses of poor people. Somehow, the people will be redeemed. And somehow, the people must rise and understand that they are also being bogged down by mental poverty. The reason some of them worship their oppressors. We still grapple with rudimentary issues. no light, no water. Get vow. We can do something about it. Idea beat abundance, men and women without conscience. They are hardened. Development cannot occur in a state of dangerous politics. Dangerous politics deny the state of strategic thinkers. Thinkers examine the state and suggest ways out. Thinkers enable states to come out with principles and objectives that stimulate progress. Did you say that somehow we will be fine? Yes, we will be fine. It always comes to a time. Men and women of goodwill will arise. When they come, you know what they do? They aspire to great leadership, mass movement. Mass movement in the direction of prosperity. In that case, a state the people believe it's theirs. A state they will protect. A state they will love. In that kind of state, as my radio, you're watching me. I'm watching you too. People that create their states. Remember Cornelius Vanderbilt? J.P. Morgan? You remember them? Remember Henry Ford? These are names known with the innovation and big business they created in the United States of America. They defined the United States by their developing models for modern railroads to the people. It was their creative genius. They came from small beginnings to build their emulate the men built in Nigeria. Yes, I can see some of them. I can see you. Though times are hard, but some Nigerians are also proving that all they need is that leadership that can inspire them to the top. It comes when the African state to create the understanding of where the state is coming from, to prepare it ought to be. Winston Hastings says that the empires of the mind are the empires of the future. To the reluctance of its citizens to aspire to great innovation. I was looking at this book before I came on. Nigeria is looking at what the different professors wrote here. And it's a book edited by 3 professors. Professor Yuade, Professor Akinsoya. Give detailed analysis of Nigeria's checkered history. If you look at the call for a national conference or sovereign national conference in Nigeria has become a totalizing echo of the national question. I just want you to reflect on that line. The author goes on to state that a call for a national conference rents the air again, senseless killing of innocent people in Kaduna and Abuja by Muslim fundamentalists in the ground history to the present predicament of the state. Books empowers the mind to understand the past clearly. You must delve into our leaders though. But great leadership comes from deep thinking. Deep thinking is one of the rewards of deep reading. That is why they say great leaders are philosopher kings. They I reviewed this lecture, A State of Our Own, a lecture delivered by Professor Egosa in Commonwealth Studies at the Chin. He argues that the state has failed to meet the imperatives of national cohesion and development. He examined second independence. He talked about federalism. And he talked about the decolonization of the state in Africa. And he goes on to present the solution. So if you missed that review, you can go back to Wednesday's edition of the program. Remember, I started what a nation is. Let me remind you. A common descent and language. It is also a body of persons inhabiting a definite territory, and they are united by the act and the fact of living together on a common land. But by living together, they develop certain things in common. Have we not developed certain things in common by living together? Is Nigeria not a nation? You can also make the point that the ties, there are common feelings to live together. You know, that feeling that we are one. Let's live together. So what makes a group of people a nation is not necessarily a common consciousness or mindedness. For example, the United States, Switzerland. You know, but here, I hear some people say they are first Igbo before being a Nigerian. In Nigerian, I think Awolowo made that argument. He did. Awolowo made the argument that you were first a Yoruba before you are a Nigerian. And I made reference to Zeman, a scholar of politics, who is a condition in law. Are you getting this? Mind. Statehood is a condition in law, but nationality is a spiritual possession. So you can say that that feeling of Igbo-ness is a spiritual possession. That spirit of Fulani-ness is. But when the Fulani comes, and the Yoruba stands, and the Igbo stands, spiritual consciousness, that connection among them, you can easily see that he is a Fulani, he is Yoruba, he is an Igbo. That consciousness, perhaps that consciousness comes when they are playing football and they have the consciousness of Nigeria. It's about a state of our own. I also made the common territory over a long period. So do we have common ideals as an ethnic state? Have we been able to fuse our differences in such a way that make up? Poland was partitioned in the last quarter of the 18th century, with Austria-Hungary and Russia in control of the Poles. Russia grabbed a part of it. Austria-Hungary grabbed a part of it. In Russia, Polish, in Austria-Hungary, and the ones that stood in the middle. Through immense struggle, Ogaden out of Ethiopia and brought them back to Somalia. What happened? A war ensued. Ethiopia did not take it like, we don't know what tomorrow will be like. It is part of what Egosa Osagai raised in this lecture. I want you to read this lecture. You get it on udarabooks.com. It's about the state of our own. Years of struggle for our country of their own. You know, the Slavs existed in different parts of Europe, but at some point, the Olanimu Ajayi, who talked about the Yugoslavian example, the Czechoslovakia example. Then when you talk about common religion, you know, religion promotes nationalistic sentiments. The unification of Belgium and the Netherlands at the 1815 Vienna Conference did not last. You know, today you see Belgium and you see the Netherlands. At some point, they were one country after the Vienna. You see, Belgians are mostly Catholics. Why those from the Netherlands are mostly Protestants? Can you see the Dutch are mostly Protestants? They are Christians, but they refuse to exist together. There was something not necessarily be true. But other, I'm taking you down history lane to put the facts on the table, and you make your conclusion. Remember, at independence in 1947, because the Muslims felt that the Hindus would dominate them, so they wanted a country of their own. And Britain agreed with her. You are Shiite. I am Sunni. Like in the Middle Belt, you know there's a rivalry between the Shiites and the Sunnis. Iran are Shiites, mostly Shiites. Iraq, mostly Sunni. So the Iran-Iraq war of the early 80s was a war between the Shiites and the Sunnis. Are you with me in this class? The lines, I'll open the line. I'll open the line. We are using just one line. So that line is 080 999 18449. If you're outside the country, plus 234 80 999 18449. So the number is on the screen. I want to hear from you. Let's talk. Let's put the issues on the front burner. WhatsApp calls only. Yes, WhatsApp calls only. WhatsApp calls are richer and louder. Now look at this. Common political aspiration. The need to check British colonialism brought together Nigeria's different ethnic nationalities, right? Ignoring the differences in culture, language, and creed. At that time, the colonialists were the common enemies. So let's fight them, let them go. They came together and fought the British. After the British left, Awolowo realized fully that it's Yoruba, Azikiwe, Amibo. Amadu Bello, we are Fulanese, Hausa-Fulanese. There's an interview I'm going to play, and I want you to listen attentively to that interview. It's an interview with Professor Determination. But before that interview, I was talking about British colonialism. In Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. So they came together to fight Bonaparte. Bonaparte was from France, Napoleon Bonaparte. Remember after the 1789 French Revolution. You know, sometimes people also think revolution will bring good determination. The French Revolution became dictators immediately. They began to fight themselves. And that led to what was called, or what is called, the reign of terror. The reign of terror. The revolutionists or revolutionary began to execute themselves. Different power blocks they emerge. That was revolution. So in that case, you have destroyed what you revolution. At that point, the head of the army Napoleon Bonaparte took control of the country. And he began a quest to conquer the whole of Europe. The same thing that listen to this interview with Professor Tony Falola. Remember this book? One of the Understanding Modern Nigeria, Ethnicity, Democracy and Development, written by Professor Tony Falola. Is the Francis Mosiga Chair in Humanities at the University of Austin, Texas. He started with Obafemi Awolowo University. A great African. He has written a book for you to read, Understanding Modern Nigeria. I recommend this book to you. From literatures, advocates of self-determination point to the conflicts that exist in a state of nations as the reason. Balkan from time to time revolted against the leadership of the Turks. Czechs and Slovaks revolted against their domination in Austria-Hungary, like Biafra revolted in Nigeria. However, there is no Somalia offers more stability than a polynational state like Nigeria. If you look at the question of India at its formation, Pakistan made the argument of ground of not wanting to be dominated by the Hindus. But before we knew it, Pakistan broke up. Does it mean that what makes a group of people a nation is not necessarily a community of race, language, or religion, but the sentiment?
I'll complicate your question for you, because that's what I do as a professor. And then on one side, or the United States, the mono that you've spoke about, as in the case of Pakistan that you invoked, and Somalia, and the dual, D-U-A-L, that people don't talk about, the case of Rwanda, with different management styles. The most difficult to manage is actually the dual societies. And so far, theory of managing a dual society. And the current president, who has been staying for criticisms for and against, may ultimately lead us to that kind of theory, which is for Hutu. So that one is there. Mono society refragments itself, just as the Lori. So even if you have cleavages, we share it. Other forms of cleavages we merge. So that doesn't tell us you won't fight. Then you now come to plural societies. Some countries are lucky. Like in the case of a plural society like the US, bear in mind that the boundaries of states are not coterminous with the boundaries of ethnicities. People tend to forget that. If you put all Black people in the state of California, and you put all Texas, all Hispanic in the state of Texas, and all these are differently structured, and they're structured not along ethnicity as you have in Africa, but along race. And bear in mind, the Indian example you invoked, many people tend that when they were formulating the Indian constitution that provides its stability, they walk into it many ideas of Hinduism. Look at the argument of Bello in the 60s and in the 50s. You could see how he disagreed with Awolowo and Zik along the same question that you posed. And the way he formulated it is and structure a political arrangement that will work with those differences. So that's one argument. Now, as to whether you can build sentiments and consciousness, why don't you turn the nation into a religion, which is the concept of the flag, which is to unite you. The concept of a national anthem, that's a religion. The concept of a pledge, and then flesh them into policies like the Nigerian National Service. Products of the Obafemi Awolowo University to Zaria, they will understand people in Zaria. But that has had an opposite effect. Why don't you govern on the premise of class? Why don't you invoke Marxism instead of the liberal national sentiment? That if you can accumulate all the poor people, and the Nigerian political parties have demonstrated that, because there is only one political party in Nigeria, Tif Party, TTP. They are all thieves. You already know that. Because you can move from one party on Monday to another. They will form the real insurgency to formulate the framework and the plank to unite strong religious identity. They also constitute serious obstacles. Having said that, let me make 2 points, one that will shock you. If you look at these Japanese have killed their citizens than foreigners. The Nigerian army has killed more Nigerians than non-Nigerians. Politics is not to kill your own citizens. The Nigerian police, historically from the colonial state, is structured to protect those in power. That is its function. From the time the colonial number of police that is used for members of the Senate, House of Representatives, cabinet members, governor's wife, is far more than the number that is looking for thieves and kidnappers. But that has its origin from the colonial state. Now let me now shock you. You know, there's the argument that maybe our problems are not enough. Maybe we have not generated enough problems. And that because we have not generated enough, where is the poor people's army? Where is the unity of millions of poor people marching on the streets? Why will you go to the senator for money? Some people will say, okay, also let's shift this conversation to the followers themselves. And let's also shift this conversation to the issue that maybe these problems have not overwhelmed people to know that they should have a stake. In the book, elegantly titled, We Are Biafrans, actually, I ordered that book. Well, it turns out that the intention of the author is ties that will bring people together to see many of what we're talking about as a common problem that should unite our of citizenship, restructure the idea of followership, and begin to question leadership more aggressively and more forcefully.
State Affairs with Edmondo B.
Follow Ladder, Ethnicity, Democracy, and Development. I'll this book to you. Going beyond narratives of post-colonial dysfunction, this book highlights the contradictions, ambiguities, and positive potentials of Africa's most populous country, who seeks to understand modern Nigeria. Read this book by Professor Tony Falola. Get your copy on udarabooks.com. You can also contact us on the WhatsApp number on the screen. Your voice, contribute. Join the class. Let's learn from you. Falola has spoken. What do you have? Have any question for me? I'm ready to answer your questions. Okay? So you can throw your question on Facebook. Download State Affairs app on Google Play Store. On Apple Store, just search for State Affairs with Edmondo Pillow. You will love to listen on that app. It's so clear. The app also has a podcast, a section. But we've not been updating that section. So we are going to go back and update the audio podcast on the app. It's about a state of our own. How do we create it? Like I said in that interview, there is not a mono-national state like Somalia offers more stability than a polynational state like Nigeria. Mono means one ethnic group, one religion. And Somalia is an example. But you know what happened? They now went into Shabab is controlling a part of Somalia. So that is an example of a mono-national state. Giving strength and currency to national objectives. That is one of the advantages of a multinational state. The principle would lead to multiplication of states if you want to have mono-states. How many states are we going to create as I mean country? So if you say we need mono-national states, how many states are we going to create out of borders and the rise of national armies with the consequence of a more chaotic global politics? I'm raising questions. It's emerge requiring the assistance of large states. You know, small states are easily bullied in the international system. It's a lot from China. That is not to say that small states don't have their own advantages. But they require NATO to create a defense system to protect them. Is that what we want in Africa? By the end of World War II, new states began to emerge in Africa, with wars and war in Mozambique, war in the Congo, war in Nigeria. As we are speaking, there is war in Burkina Faso. You might call it Islamic insurgency. There is war in Mali. You can call it Islamic insurgency. Nkrumah and others thought that a United States of Africa for a single market, free movement, and a single monetary policy. Nationalists who achieved statehood ended up suppressing those within the state that demands nationhood too. Are you getting this argument? You know, South Sudan wanted to be independent. So when some ethnic nationalities within South Sudan began to clamor for their own state, Salva Kiir didn't want to hear anything about it. So that's the point I make here, that nationalists who advance the right of statehood on the grounds of their diversity, the Ruthenians and Ukrainians in Poland the right to self-determination. The nationalists in Hungary, I just gave you the example of Sudan. So somehow, when you keep breaking up the state, it impedes internationalism and globalization. There is a book I'm reading. It's entitled A History of Political Thought, written by an Indian, Subrata Mukherjee. It's a deep book of politics, but I decided to bring you a part of it. You know, he wrote about 15th and 16th century Rome. He said, in Rome, conflict between the plebeians and patricians was institutionalized within the Senate and popular assemblies. In contrast, and Florence are part of Italy. So in the 15th and 16th century, they were running their kind of administrations. They were autonomous. But you see, they were brought together to form Italy. I want you to get that point. They were autonomous. So in Rome, the conflicts between the plebeians and the patricians were institutionalized within the city. They go to the amphitheater, the Coliseum. You remember the Coliseum? Where the Senate will debate. That is where you see they will debate. That was the Rome model. It was democratic. They will argue and they will build consensus. But with atomization of society and each person becoming an island, religionism and conspiracies were rampant, and government became an arena for powerful coteries. I'm reading from the book Subrata. So he's describing Rome and Florence in the 15th and 16th century. Today, it was chaotic. It was violent. The political models in Rome and Florence were different. But at some point, they were united to form Italy. They were poor because of their politics. Where there is chaos, where there is violence, where there's ethnicity or ethnic hate, the people are always poor. Take note of that. The people are always poor. That's why Nigeria is poor. What you sow is what you reap. If you are sowing corruption, violence in your elections, rigging in your elections, the students will also be cheating in exam. There's nothing you can do. Teachers will cheat. They will even come to work. Yeah, they will collect salary. Because the character of the state determines to Italy. I'm yet to hear from anybody. I want to hear some voices. I'm here to learn from you. Omotayo Oluwarotimi Onobamiro says, Edmund, I believe our differences are not too great as to make us separate. Nigeria will always be a greater nation than the nations that can come from it. We can always... Femi Labi says, you just asked the question on my mind. Who is creating the Nigerian dream? Ayebe Solomon, good afternoon to you. Ayebe says it's nice to be in class with you. Thank you. Ayebe Solomon. Wahid Okbayemi, let's go to X and see if there are comments coming. X. Okay, I can't get any comment yet. And thank you for joining on X. Thank you for viewing. We are happy you're here. Let's go on YouTube. And see. Okay. We are on YouTube. It's coming. Some people came to my place claiming to be people assigned by your state government to be collecting tax. I requested for an account number. I was given personal account. You don't have to pay into personal account. You should know. If you want to pay your tax, you pay it to your state government, not personal account. Izuchukwu Anozie said, what happened? What happened? I don't get the question. What happened in Nzogu? So that's what happened to Nzogu. He died in the war. Nzogu died early in the war. Thank you for that question. Let's talk more. Violence and luxury undermined the social fabric. Virtue declined and greed increased. So Florence is an example, or Nigeria is an example of Florence of the 15th and the 16th centuries. The author of the book, A History of Political Thought, Subrata says, because of the kind of politics that undermined the social fabric, virtue declined and greed increased. enforcement of law became weak and was compromised according to contingencies. Is that not what is happening in Nigeria? Enforcement of law is weak. You can buy the police if you have money. You can buy anything in Nigeria. You know, the law is applied brutally on the poor. And, sir, is it about the African personality? So at this point, I want to discuss with Nigeria's former Minister of Education. That's Professor Tunde Adeniran. You know, Tunde Adeniran is a professor of international politics. I was asking him, the African personality. Yes, is it the personality of the African, the mindset of the African? Yes, in the 21st century, power, prince, it as the case may be. Hello, Prof.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
As we speak, there is crisis in the Congo. There is crisis in Sudan. Ethiopia just came out of a recent civil war. In Mali, Burkina Faso, there is Al-Shabaab in Somalia. In Nigeria, Boko Haram is dominant around the Lake Chad Basin. And you can see, even from in the
it won't be right to say that it is connected with the African personality. We inherited certain disadvantages quite all right, because gates were broken, and the way people that ordinarily do not have identical cultural backgrounds were forced to come together under some nations or some states and so forth. This came suddenly from the colonial fiat. If it had grown as a result of common understanding, working together, the way some African communities, societies were doing in the past, building that created artificial boundaries, different people were wedded together, and in an attempt to now find ways of working together and so forth, the colonials used that as instrument to come. Hey, you people, they know that wedge, they continue to put it beyond. That was one. Then the other one, of course, is religion. Religion was introduced as a way of making people have faith in the Almighty God. Became one of the forces and factors creating problem, instead of serving as a rallying point for, or even development, for understanding, for having common concern for humanity. It has turned out to be a negative thing. The various countries that you mentioned earlier on, Somalia and all that, it must be something wrong with Africa. What is wrong with Africa is that we have not been able to fully appreciate the dimensions of the problem that we have, and also take necessary steps, then taking the right steps. I do believe that we have in this continent leaders who are mindful to address the problems facing us, so that we will be able to solve them for now and prevent future occurrences. I will say two things in this regard. Now, what has been going on without the interference of outsiders? Take the Congo, for example. To make that particular country dominate the entire world. So endowed as Nigeria. Well, look at where we are today.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Professor Tunde Adeniran there, a professor of international politics, the author of the book African Power, Principles and Praxis, and global politics. You'll find this book on udarabooks.com. Order your copy, and you will enjoy reading it. It will boost your understanding of the Word and create a deeper vision of the Word, and then you take advantage of an economic power. You need to read this book to understand how Africa is structured, and then great read. Go to udarabooks.com and order your copy. The different definitions of the state. Now, let me draw your attention to an essay, The Theory of the State. His argument is profound. By the character of the state, Unyoziri means that the state is and where it draws its legitimacy from. Unyoziri argues that in a defective environment, true federalism is not capable of resolving all the conflict arising from the interaction of the different identities of the state. He makes the point that state infrastructures, like major institutions, its capacity, personnel, institutions of the state like the police, like the EFCC, like the army. The character of those agencies also determine the character of the state. It determines how efficient the state runs its institutions. I have talked about Hausa-Fulani, but I also want to look at another of his writing, entitled Nigerian Federalism, a Project in Crisis. In the essay, Osagai acknowledges the crisis of Nigerian federalism that persists despite its innovative instrumentalities. What does he mean by innovative instruments? Let's listen to his definition. As we get ready to listen, he will talk about federal character. He will look at the third tier of government. Essay in question, Osagai links the problem of Nigeria's federalism to the failure of the Nigerian system. Are you getting this point? Many have been calling, let's restructure the state, let's redefine the state. But the state is not being redefined, but it's very gradual and slow. Under Buhari, some subjects were moved from the exclusive list to the concurrent list. Now states can generate power. It's also Osagai, a professor.
Federalism is a system that is about the societies that it serves to work out its own instrumentalities as it deems fit for its circumstances. In the case of Nigeria, students, constitution makers, practitioners, politicians, statesmen, and so on, have acknowledged the case. And whether we like to admit it or not, this is a country that has existed of a system that was intended to be a solution to the problems of managing diversity. And Nigeria stands at the vanguard, of the most innovative federal systems. And let me just say, that particular line talks about crisis and the instrument, referring specifically to the colonial state. The colonial state was, if you like, a nostrum being some experiments that have not been tested elsewhere. You would know that the greatest propagator of the federal solution in the colonial world is England itself, Great Britain. You will find the British hand in all of these things. And what the British tried to do was more or less, and I dare say that many of these, nostrums have worked. And Nigeria is not an exception at all. It is in the nature of the federal system to, through innovations, through creativity, through constitutional refinements and amendments, remind us that in terms of the history of where we are today, you would know that the Fourth Republic was established in this true federalism movement. And that one must be remembered as the backdrop for these discussions. So it's a discussion that has been long in 1983, 1982, and in 1994, and up until the transition to the current democratic dispensation. So I think that's the way to look at it. Nigeria has done well. Those very innovative instrumentalities must be applauded for how they have.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
How Citizens Summit, organized by the National Association of Sea Dogs, that's the pirate confraternity. The discourse was entitled Quest for True Federalism, Secession or Regional Control of Nigerian Federation. Point that unless there is a revamping of the civil order, degeneration and decay has been witnessed in these political times, as was witnessed under Yar'Adua, as was seen under Jonathan and Buhari's government. Talking about a well-organized state that ensures the well-being and security of its people. These victorious citizens, I'm talking about economic prosperity. I'm talking about where the voices of the Igbo nation will be listened to. The voices of the Yoruba nation will be listened to. The voices of the Fulani nations will be listened to. And together will form a consensus. But for those who want a country of their own, have we argued? Have we made the point? Have we discussed intensely, perhaps to convince them that it may not be the best way to go? Should we consider a regional system where the ethnic blocs would take charge of their destinies and relate with the center? Have we placed the options on the table? Since his present character, we have seen it happen in Yugoslavia, even Russia. There was the breakup of the Soviet Union. Austria-Hungary. So, it can happen. Belgium, Netherlands, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. Understand that. Except that tension is still, but it was negotiated. It was negotiated. And today there are 50 states. They were negotiating, okay, you cannot dominate us, we will be in charge of our state. And you can see, today they are 50 and they are happy. They might not be perfect. Florence, Rome, and others came say, Professor Adigun Agbaje makes a point here about ethnicity. Okay, let me leave the ethnicity part. He talks about saving Nigeria, political science, to create a deeper understanding of the Nigerian question. Adigun Agbaje is a renowned professor of political science. I read it, and I wanted to know from Adigun Agbaje what the future holds if what was going on in the Benue axis continued. So the professor listens and answers. Break this down. It's from the governor of Benue State, Samuel Otom. He says, what is happening to us is not a hidden agenda, because the headsmen, through me, the attacks are also the continuation of the jihad, which was truncated by the Benue people in 1804. This is coming from a governor.
Basically, you get what you deserve. So if we are going to be afraid of the future, then let's work to change the trajectory of the future. If Nigeria continues to go like this, there may be no future. Of people, conjuring up ethnic coalition to begin to seriously address some of these issues. The problem with those in government is that they are so swarmed with the minor things of, I want to hold on to power, I want to amass so much wealth. The strategic issues of the continuity of Nigeria in a peaceful, ethically sound structure for unity continues to decline, continues to disappear. And then the reality is that people use violence as an instrument of bargaining, and then it becomes established, and then everybody forms his or her own militia, and then the spaces for peace just continue to disappear. And we foreboding, this is real. Somalia was one country, one people. And that's why I said at times we mobilized. They went to the clan level. Somali nation and state is still in trouble.
Professor Agbaje, I'm worried. Yeah. We have the Professor Agbaje's scholar means chaotic. Yet bandits have taken over the north. Yet kidnappers have taken over our highways. Should I blame Adigun Agbaje too?
Well, I would say that we are all to blame. But who carries the can? Who is able to say, let's bring all those that are knowledgeable, and not just our system. I mean, people like you, public intellectuals, who are on top of the situation. So let's look in unusual places. When you look at the story of the First Republic, or up to the First Republic, what did we see? We saw an elite general. When you talk about the free education in Western Nigeria, it was intellectuals that constructed that. The program was constructed in a manner that people could see the logic and everything based on intellectual input. Our leaders were intellectuals.
I hope you enjoyed the discourse. Are you flowing with me? It's a deep class. Recommending a book to you, The Untold Story of the Nigeria-Biafra War. A chronological, get a copy of this book and be glad. The content of this book reflects the events towards simultaneous of government's control on both sides of the war. Good book to read. In this book, Dr. Luke Nnaemeka Aneke presents the Nigerian Civil War in a different and unique form, an amalgam of not controlled. In his foreword of this book, late General Philip F. Young wrote, "The presentation historical picture that is free of rancor and the play of personal emotions, for which work, according to you won't have this book. You should save up for it if you are good at saving. This is one book you should have. Instances of the Nigerian Civil War written by Dr. Luke Nemeka Aneke. Great read, great book. We are talking about a state of our own. So this true commission. Matthew Hassan Kuka is the author of this great book, Witness to Justice. Matthew Hassan Kuka. Have you read Matthew Hassan Kuka? He has reviewed justice of the military and forward to give us hope and optimism. Falola says in Kuka's book, he says Kuka's book, No Study of Nigerian Politics, Nationalism, down study. We need Nigeria's